Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Earwax. I'm Colin, and today we're going to be going over 5 modern pop punk bands that you should be listening to. Now, there's a couple caveats for how I considered bands for this list. First and foremost, they have to be a modern band, which means, at least in my opinion, their first physical release or their first studio release had to come either 2010 or later. That's kind of what I consider a modern band. Obviously, the past 14 years doesn't seem like a recent era, but in the grand scheme of music history, it's pretty modern and pretty recent. They also have to be predominantly a pop punk band. Some of these bands do have elements of other genres, specifically like Midwest emo or alternative or even some like new wave experimental stuff. But at their core, they do have to be mostly a pop punk band. And then the last condition is they have to be a band that I actually actively listen to. So I'm sure there's a lot of great bands out there that are that I didn't consider or not on this list, either just because I'm somewhat familiar with them, but I don't listen to them on a regular basis, or they're just not someone that I think is good. But that being said, let's dive right in. So I'm going to be doing these in chronological order as far as when I discovered them. And the first act on here, or the first artist that I discovered, was Kenny Hoopla. So Kenny Hoopla is a young musician who has been putting out music since I want to say like 2018, 2017, 2018, but it was really 2020 is when he had his breakout year. He released the single "How Can I Rest in Peace If I'm Buried by the Highway," which I heard for the first time on a local radio station, Indie 1023. Back then it was called Open Air. And this track, it's not even a pop punk track. It's more, I'd say, like dance punk, a little bit of new wave, a little bit of post punk, and just kind of like indie alternative. But it had some, you know, aspects of pop punk, and since then a lot of the stuff he's put out has been pretty much straight pop punk, including the EP or mixtape Survivor's Guilt that he came out with in 2021, so about a year after he released his debut EP, How Will I Rest in Peace If I'm Buried by a Highway. Now, Survivor's Guilt was a collaborative mixtape with Travis Barker. So, obviously, having the drummer from Blink 182 and arguably one of the best drummers in rock history definitely ups your cred on being a legitimate pop punk act. He's currently, I believe, doing a solo tour, but he's played like When We Were Young Fest. He's open for even though I'm not a huge fan, Machine Gun Kelly and Youngblood. So he definitely is getting his name out there, and I can't wait to see what he continues to do. A lot of his tracks are, again, very, very predominantly pop punk, but he still does a lot of elements of like post punk, new wave, experimental, alternative, dance punk. There's definitely a lot of creativity in his music, and it's something that I'm really enjoying. And like I said, I can't wait to see what he continues to put out. The next band on the list that I discovered is going to be Neck Deep. Now, Neck Deep is a Welsh pop punk band that got their start in, I want to say, 2012. I discovered them in late 2020, so probably I'd say like a few months after Kenny Hoopla. One of the vinyl collector groups that I'm a part of on social media, someone posted an album of theirs, saying that they were this great band that wasn't getting a lot of recognition, or at least not getting enough recognition, so I checked them out. They just released their 5th full-length LP, the self-titled album, which came out back in January of this year, and I've definitely been playing that on repeat pretty heavily throughout the year. I don't know if it's necessarily going to make my top 5 albums of the year, but it'll definitely get an honorable mention. It's a really fun album, really fun LP. They have just a really playful kind of classic pop punk sound that you don't get from a lot of modern bands. As much as I love experimentation and experiment or throwing in different genres into what you're creating, and I think a lot of bands on this list do that very well. There's something to be said about sticking to your influences and just pumping out good, solid pop punk songs, and that's definitely what they do. Specifically, there's a couple standouts from the self-titled album, specifically We Need More Bricks, which is one of the singles. as well as Heartbreak of the Century. And then I also really like They May Not Mean To, But They Do, which is just a great song about like childhood trauma and like trying to understand your parents for like the people that they are, and accepting their flaws, and they did the best they could. So I think overall, they're definitely, I think probably one of the more well-known acts on this list, but definitely someone that not enough people are listening to, especially if you're fans of like Simple Plan, Blink 182, even like early Fallout Boy, um, old school Jimmy Eat World, just like the good classic kind of like mainstream pop punk commercial acts. They're definitely going to be right up your alley. All right, now we're going to fast forward a couple years and move to Valentine's Day of 2022, I believe, or maybe it's 2023. Honestly, I can't remember at this point. But Rise Records, one of my favorite record labels, did a mystery bundle of 8 vinyl releases that were all red vinyls or red records, hence like the Valentine's Day theme. And it was like $50, so I ordered it. Got some really great albums in there, got some not so great albums in there, but one that really stood out was an album called Heavy Love by a band called Man Overboard. Now, technically, Man Overboard, I believe, got their start in 2008, but their first studio release wasn't until 2010, so they still count on this list as a modern band. Now, the one difference about them, I will, admit, is that I think they're the only band on this list that is not currently active. They did a hiatus in 2016 after releasing their core 4 studio albums, released their 4 full-length studio albums, and then they came back from the hiatus in 2018 with intentions to do a 10-year tour in 2020 of their debut album Real Talk. Obviously, some stuff happened in 2020. They weren't able to do that tour. 2021, they had planned and sold tickets to a handful of dates, and then for whatever reason decided to call off the tour. And the social media pages have been pretty much silent ever since. I do think the lead singer or one of the band members is doing a solo project or a side project right now, but they haven't like officially announced they're breaking up. So still going to count them as a modern band. There's still a chance they could be putting something out new. But that being said, even if they don't, the 4 albums they released between 2010 and 2015 are really, really good. Taking influence from like Taking Back Sunday and Saves the Day, a little bit of Blink thrown in there as well. They are just a really, really solid group, really, really solid band. Definitely on the poppier side of the bands that I've listed here, but just good, classic, easygoing pop punk, and definitely someone you should check out if you haven't yet. So about a year and a half ago, on that same vinyl collectors group that I discovered Neck Deep, I discovered a band called Origami Angel. Someone had posted a copy or a physical copy of an EP of theirs called Third Gen. Now, Third Gen is a reference to the third generation of Pokemon games, so Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. The names on the album are Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, and then XD Gale of Darkness. So they're a duo from DC, been around since 2016, put out a string of like EPs and singles, then have had a couple full-length albums in the past couple years. They're a lot of fun. They're mostly pop punk mixed with like Midwest emo. They definitely have a lot of like math rock elements to them. They have some just like kind of indie rock vibes as well, a little bit of easy core, but for the most part they're like Midwest emo pop punk, and they're a lot of fun. They've had a new single come out last month, I believe, and so hopefully they'll release another album soon. To be able to be as prolific as they've been with only 2 members, I think it's very impressive, and I love like the tongue-in-cheek lyrics of their songs, and definitely someone that I would highly recommend if you're into a little bit more of the experimental side of like emo and pop punk. All right, and the most recent band on this list that I discovered is a band called Hot Mulligan. Now, Hot Mulligan is, I would say, the least like straight up pop punk band on this list. They're probably more Midwest emo, honestly, if I'm just being, completely objective here. But they do have a lot of pop punk elements, especially in like their songwriting and like their song structure, and just the way that they tune their guitars and like their instrumentation in general. The lyrics and the vocals are significantly more like Midwest emo, but I'm going to count them anyway because, to be perfectly honest, I'm kind of obsessed with them right now. I first discovered them about a year ago. I think they popped up randomly on a Spotify playlist that I was listening to from like Hot Water Music, or maybe from like Tiny Moving Parts, or someone like that. But I became absolutely hooked. They've got 3 studio LPs. Pilot came out in 2018. You'll Be Fine in 2020, and then Why Would I Watch in 2023. I will be honest, the song titles are about as insane and unhinged as they've ever been, which is kind of a, pretty common trope in pop punk or Midwest emo. But even for a genre that's known for having ridiculous song titles, these are a little bit out of left field. But the honestly, I think like their best track is one called "Drink Milk and Run." It was a single that came out a few years ago. It never actually appeared on a full-length album, and it is just such an earworm. It is so good, you guys. I'm telling you, if you haven't listened to this track, go listen to it. Literally, pause this video right now. Go listen to it. Come back. It is absolutely incredible. I have not stopped listening to that song since I discovered it about a year ago. I will be shocked if it's not on my Spotify like top plays this year. And I cannot believe I didn't discover this band sooner. I know they haven't been around for super long, but they are doing incredible things in the emo pop punk scene. I think it's only a matter of time before you see them headlining like pretty big bills, pretty big stages, and definitely a band to keep an eye out for. So if you haven't checked them out yet, definitely go check them out. I honestly think they might be the best emo slash pop punk band to come out of the past decade. And I'm very excited to see what they do with the rest of their career. All right, cool guys. So those are going to be my picks for 5 modern pop punk bands that you should be listening to. If you haven't checked them out, go check them out. If you have, let me know down in the comments. Also, let me know what your top 5 picks are for modern pop punk bands that you should be listening to or that I should be listening to. And as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.